The evening was falling, and the sunlight gradually faded behind the treetops of the quiet forest. Igor, as usual, took a walk after a long day at work. But that evening, something strange happened in the forest. There was an unusual silence, as if nature were holding its breath in anticipation of an unknown event. Igor's heartbeat quickened as he stepped onto the path between the trees. Suddenly, he noticed a large figure. It was a bear, but not an ordinary one. It sat with its back to Igor, head bowed, as if it were crying. The soft sound emanating from the bear was unmistakable. Igor froze, feeling cold sweat running down his back. He knew that bears could be dangerous, especially at dusk, yet the behavior of this animal was unusual. The bear did not run away nor show any signs of aggression. Instead, it raised its head and looked directly at Igor. Normally, Igor's eyes reflected caution in the face of danger, but now they showed a restlessness, as if the bear were asking for help. The confusion in his mind grew. The fear and the feeling of unreality became unbearable. Igor knew he should run and get to safety, but something inside him prevented him from moving. The bear's gaze seemed to hold him captive. This is crazy, Igor thought, unable to move, while all his instincts screamed for him to flee. Yet he remained paralyzed, too captivated by what was unfolding. The bear let out another sigh, and Igor's heart pounded even faster. Why is it crying? What happened here? He wondered. The forest around him seemed to thicken, and the air grew heavier. The decision Igor made at that moment changed everything. What was meant to be a simple walk in the woods turned into the beginning of something he could never have imagined. Igor stood still, trying to comprehend what was happening. The bear did not show any aggression. On the contrary, it seemed to be waiting for something. After a few seconds, the animal slowly rose, as if it did not want to frighten Igor, and took a step forward. The bear advanced cautiously toward Igor, but his legs still did not obey him, and he did not know whether to run or to stand his ground. Then something astonishing happened. Just a few meters ahead, the bear stopped and turned its body as if inviting him to follow. The animal looked at Igor and then in the opposite direction. Igor became increasingly aware that something extraordinary was taking place. "What am I doing?" he murmured, feeling the chill of the night seeping into his bones. Yet there was something special about that bear, something that captured all his attention. It seemed as though the animal knew exactly where it was going. Perhaps it was madness, or perhaps it was a call to the unknown. With determination, Igor continued on his way. With every step, the forest grew denser. The shadows of the trees lengthened, creating the impression of infinite depth. This is crazy, Igor thought, yet he could not stop and kept following the bear. His legs, which had seemed paralyzed before, now moved with purpose, as if they had known the way long before Igor made his decision. From time to time, the bear looked back, as if to make sure that Igor was following. Igor tried to understand what was happening. He knew the risk of following a wild animal was great, yet something in the bear's behavior made him ignore all signs of danger. As they progressed, the air grew colder and darker. Night quickly fell, and the faint moonlight gradually faded away. "Where are you taking me?" Igor asked, although he knew he would probably receive no answer. Still, the bear continued unceasingly along the path. Every passing second made the situation even more surreal. The journey had only just begun, and Igor was about to face something far greater than he could ever have imagined. The forest closed in around him, the trees pressed closer together, and the path he had been following vanished. Igor began to feel uncertainty and fear, emotions he tried to suppress, but which gradually overcame him. He started doubting his actions, wondering why he had set out on all this. His breathing became heavy, yet the bear continued forward with steady steps, turning around now and then to ensure that Igor was following. It was obvious that his route had been carefully planned. The bear avoided protruding roots and stones that might be dangerous for Igor. Despite his growing fear, Igor felt increasingly confident in the bear's movements. Although the terror increased, he knew he was doing the right thing. The forest appeared more menacing, with the sounds of nature and other strange noises filling the air. Igor began to worry, yet the bear seemed to know exactly where it was headed. Suddenly, a raging river blocked their path. Igor stopped at the bank and gazed at the roaring water, which appeared deeper than he had expected. High above, the moon shone intensely, illuminating the scene. Meanwhile, the bear was already approaching an improvised bridge made of intertwined vines. The bridge looked unstable, as if it could collapse at any moment. Igor felt his heart race with fear. He worried he would not be able to cross that precarious passage. The roaring of the water was deafening, and the thought of plunging into the icy currents paralyzed him. Nevertheless, the bear carefully crossed the bridge, stopped on the other side, and turned around as if inviting Igor to follow. Igor took a deep breath, feeling the cold wind brush his face. He knew that if he did not follow now, he would never find out what awaited him on the far side of the river. With trembling legs, Igor stepped onto the vine bridge and walked slowly and cautiously. The creaking of the planks beneath his feet reminded him that every step could be dangerous. He was almost halfway across when a strong gust of wind shook the bridge violently. Igor clutched the vines tightly, feeling the fear pulse through his veins. From the opposite bank, the bear watched him patiently, as if knowing that Igor would make it. His heart pounded fiercely, but finally his feet found solid ground again, and he exhaled with relief. A silent, mutual trust formed between them, an inexplicable connection. The path continued, and with every step, Igor felt that he was drawing closer to the answer to the mystery of this strange encounter. A feeling took hold of him, as if he had embarked on a journey that went far deeper than he could ever have imagined. The forest seemed to harbor ancient secrets, and Igor wondered if he was ready for what lay ahead. Everything changed as they reached the heart of the forest, where the massive, almost impenetrable trees completely enclosed him. It was the beginning of a process of cleansing, as if nature itself was testing Igor. The bear continued to guide him, moving with caution and precision. The air seemed to grow denser, and Igor sensed that something extraordinary was about to happen. Soon, he noticed strange structures appearing among the trees and quickened his pace, trying to understand what he saw in the distance. Finally, they reached a clearing, and the scene before Igor made him freeze. In front of him lay an abandoned circus. The faded dome-like tents swayed gently in the wind, and the metal frames of the cages were completely rusted. The place exuded a sense of abandonment and sadness. Huge cages stood empty, except for one or two in which a few mistreated and neglected animals with drooping bodies and empty gazes were confined. Igor could hardly believe his eyes. "Is this really a circus?" he thought, as he tried to grasp the peculiarity of the place. Yet the bear continued on toward the center, and Igor followed, carefully maneuvering around the scattered debris. Broken toys, splinters of wooden constructions, and damaged equipment. They passed by an old Ferris wheel, its rusted cabins swaying in the wind and emitting an eerie creak. Traces of the past were visible everywhere, and Igor got the impression that the bear was somehow connected to this abandoned circus. Eventually, the bear stopped in front of a large empty cage. Igor approached cautiously, sensing the tense atmosphere in the air, bent down, and looked into the bear's eyes, in which painful memories of its past seemed to come alive. "You were here before, weren't you?" Igor whispered, feeling deep sorrow as he gazed at the animal. A slight nod from the bear confirmed his suspicion. This place was far more than mere ruins. It was a part of its history. Igor realized that the bear was not simply a wild creature of the forest, but had once been a circus performer, forced to entertain an audience. The bear's suffering was evident in its gaze. Igor felt a connection with it and understood that other animals were also suffering under these horrible conditions. "I can't leave them here," he thought as he pulled out his mobile phone. The signal was weak, but he managed to send a message to the authorities asking for help before the connection was completely lost. Igor knew he had to act quickly. The bear had led him here for a reason, and now he understood the story behind these ruins. A change was imminent, and Igor played a key role. He had no idea what further secrets would be revealed as he explored the circus. The atmosphere around him grew increasingly oppressive. The rusted cages, broken toys, and forgotten animals evoked a deep sense of sadness. With each step, Igor realized that he was on the verge of learning more about the bear. A bear that seemed to carry an invisible wound that time had not healed. The once vibrant, now faded curtains of the tent moved gently in the wind. Entering the large circus dome, Igor still felt the energy that had once filled this place. In the center stood an old circular stage, surrounded by dry, cracked seats. Igor looked around, trying to imagine how the place must have been in its glory days. Alive, full of sound and applause. Deep marks on the dirty floor testified to the harsh training the animals had undergone. Cautiously, he approached a tent behind the stage and noticed something in the bear's eyes. It was no longer the look of a free forest dweller, but that of a being that had endured a painful past. "You were a part of this, weren't you?" Igor asked the bear, which nodded silently, confirming his fears. The bear was not merely a resident of the forest, but a victim of a cruel past, forced to perform tricks for an audience that had never cared about its suffering. Igor's empathy grew, and the silence in that place seemed deafening. Every element of the destroyed circus told a story of pain, exploitation, and abuse, yet above all, that story spoke of the bear, which, though freed, still bore the visible scars of its past. Looking at the seemingly suffering animal, Igor felt an overwhelming desire to help. "I will help you. I will help you and all the others," he whispered. Igor returned to the rusted cages and tried to open one of the locks, but they were firmly shut. It became clear to him that he could not free the animals on his own. He had to call for rescuers as soon as possible. As he turned back to the bear, he wondered if there might be a way to get into the cages or find a useful tool among the debris. Just as he was about to look for something helpful, he heard a distant sound, like the humming of engines. Someone was approaching. Help was finally on its way. The rumble grew louder, breaking the oppressive silence. Igor ran toward the exit, and in the distance, the lights of vehicles appeared, illuminating part of the forest. The long-awaited support had finally arrived. Within minutes, several vehicles stopped in front of the circus, and from them stepped conservationists and police officers, led by a specialized rescue team for wild animals. Igor felt an adrenaline rush as he advanced toward them, accompanied by the bear, which had by now become the symbol of this situation. One of the conservationists, a woman with a serious expression and determined look, was the first to speak to Igor. He nodded, took a deep breath, and tried to explain the situation. During the inspection, it turned out that there were other animals in the cages, mistreated and in a deplorable state. The rescuers quickly formed a team, distributing themselves over the area to open the cages and dismantle the rusted structures. Aware of the gravity of the situation, Igor also helped to open the cages. Some animals were so weak that they could barely move. Others hesitated to come out, unable to believe that they were finally free. With a heavy heart, Igor watched as the conservationists attempted to persuade the animals to leave their cages. The injured animals were carefully carried on stretchers while the rescue teams continued their work. Meanwhile, the police secured the scene, trying to find out what had occurred. That place, which had once served as an entertainment venue, had become a site of animal suffering and abuse. One of the officers, while collecting evidence of the mistreatment, noted that the situation was far more serious than initially assumed. Igor understood that the abandoned circus was merely a facade to cover up illegal activities. As the animals were transported to safe shelters, the bear that had led him there remained by his side, as if it too sensed that the days of suffering were coming to an end. In its eyes lay a mixture of peace and fatigue, as if it knew that its mission was complete. After all the animals were rescued and taken to specialized centers for care and rehabilitation, Igor watched with relief as the eerie place gradually emptied. He knew that this was only the beginning of a deep investigation and that the illegal exploitation of animals would finally come to an end. Igor, now an unwitting hero, saw the bear return to the forest. No words were needed for them to understand each other. Both knew that the hard-won freedom, though precious, was not yet complete. Igor was certain that from that moment on his life would never be the same. He had rescued the animals from the abandoned circus and realized that he had become a defender of wildlife. He would never forget the look in the bear's eyes that had shown him the way. The encounter with that animal had changed something within him. He was no longer just an adventurer, but a protector of nature. The story of the abandoned circus sparked a huge public outcry. Media reports revealed the extent of the illegal animal exploitation that had taken place there for years. As a result of the investigation, the authorities closed the case and arrested those responsible. But for Igor, this event was only the first step in a long series of actions. He recognized the urgency of the problem when he witnessed the suffering of the animals firsthand. This experience prompted Igor to become actively involved in animal protection. He began to recount his experiences and how he had witnessed the mistreatment of animals. His testimonies resonated with the public, and soon he started actively participating in campaigns for animal protection. Over the following year, Igor traveled across the country, participating in educational programs and events dedicated to animal welfare. He became an influential voice in the fight for the rights of animals, using his personal experience as evidence that anyone can make a difference. The bear became a symbol of hope and perseverance. Photographs of the bear on its journey to freedom spread widely and became an emblem of the fight against animal exploitation. Every time Igor saw these images, he felt mixed emotions. Pain for the suffering the bear had endured and gratitude for the fate that had brought them together under such unexpected circumstances. After the rescue, Igor continued to return to the quiet forest, walking along the familiar paths where it had all begun. He felt that this place would never be the same again. Although Igor never saw the bear in person again, he knew that the animal lived free somewhere in the vast forests. Over time, Igor became known as an advocate for animal rights, but he never forgot where it all began. The day he met the bear was etched into his memory forever. That silent connection, the bear's gaze, and the circus full of secrets would always remain in his heart. Sometimes Igor wondered what would have happened if he had not followed the bear. That question lingered, but deep down he knew he had made the right decision. Now, every time he returned to the forest, he realized that that unexpected encounter had changed his life forever.